It was a typical afternoon when the Parker family moved into their newly purchased century-old house. What the family of four had always dreamed of was to live in a home steeped in history, charm, and character. However, what they did not know was that this new house would hold secrets of its own, secrets that would change everything. It was like any other moving day. One box after another was unpacked. Rooms started to take shape, and children made sure to explore every part of their new home. Mr. and Mrs. Parker were excited but exhausted, having spent weeks organizing the move. Ethan and Sophie were two kids who enjoyed every creak and groan of the old house and believed they were embarking on great adventures in what they called their mystery mansion. The house had that timeless appeal: high ceilings, intricate woodwork, and stained glass windows. Little did they know that a real mystery lay waiting for them, basically beyond the walls. As Ethan wandered around the house, upset and fidgeting about, he noticed something strange. In one of the bedrooms upstairs, behind an old tall bookshelf, was a very faint line that didn't match the rest of the plaster on the wall. He wasn't certain at first, but the more he looked, the more convinced he became that something was off. "Sophie, come here! I think there's something weird over here," Ethan called out. Equally curious, Sophie ran up, her eyes wide with wonder. She attempted to shove the heavy bookshelf out of the way. The bookshelf was older, full of old and dusty books and trinkets that probably had been left there by previous owners. After much grunting and shoving, they were finally able to shift it enough to show what lay behind. They were speechless at what they had come across. Behind the bookshelf, there was a small door of wood that was not opened in decades. Dust gathered thick around its edges, and it was sealed shut with what seemed to be years of neglect. Sophie's heart went into overtime as she whispered, "Do you think it's locked? What's behind it?" "I don't know," Ethan replied, "but we need to find out." Reaching to open the door, they heard it groan as the rusty hinges protested. Dust filtered down around them in a soft cloud. The stale scent of the air that had been enclosed for God knows how long filled the room. Ethan's heart racing. "I'm sorry," pounding, as the door finally creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow passageway behind it. Dim light from the bedroom reached barely into the hidden space, casting long shadows that reached and danced across the old wallpaper. The kids froze, unsure of what they had just stumbled upon. Clearly, this wasn't some sort of storage room or forgotten closet. This passageway actually went far beyond what the kids were able to see, really shrouded in mystery. "We have to go in," Sophie said firmly. Her voice was trembling in a mixture of excitement and a bit of fear. She took the small flashlight from the desk nearby, flicked it on, and went inside first. The passage was cold and narrow. The walls were lined with faded, peeling wallpaper that in all probabilities had not been replaced for years. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling, while every step taken groaned the wooden floor under their feet. They felt like they stepped into another world, a forgotten part of the house nobody had seen for years, perhaps even decades. After trudging what felt like several eternities, the passageway opened into a larger room. The air in it was heavy and musty. Everything inside was covered in dust and draped in old white sheets. It seemed as if time just stood still. In the middle of the room sat an antique-looking chest, its brass lock long rusted and broken. Sophie shone the flashlight across the room. It fell on the chest. "Do you think there's treasure inside?" she asked, her tone both excited and scared. "Only one way to find out," Ethan replied, curious about what happens next. Stay tuned and get ready for the unexpected. They walked towards the chest, their hearts pounding with each step in a synchronized drumming. Fumbling in fear, they opened it. There was a loud creak, as if in protest to finally being opened after all these years. Stacks of ancient papers, books, and photographs lined the inside. But one thing stood out particularly: a small, leather-bound journal. Sophie picked it up carefully and opened it, dusting the dirt off. The pages were yellow from age, and the ink had all faded, but it was still legible. The handwriting was hard to read. I'm sorry, the handwriting was elegant and old-fashioned, but it was clear that the journal belonged to someone named Henry. "Who's Henry?" Sophie asked, flipping through the pages. Ethan shrugged. "Maybe he used to live here?" As Sophie continued to read, the journal unfolded the life of Henry, a man who had once occupied this house more than a century ago. He was a learned man, a pursuer of wisdom, but at the same time a recluse, a person who did not open himself up to anybody. The journal spoke of his works, but it also mentioned a secret hidden part of the house that only he knew about. The more they read, the weirder it got. Henry had written about the discovery he'd made while fixing up the house, a hidden door, just like the one Ethan and Sophie had just found. But the last couple of entries in the journal were just surreal. Henry wrote about what lies beyond the door and warned anyone who might find it to leave it alone. Ethan and Sophie exchanged a nervous glance. Was there more to this hidden room than met the eye? Was he trying to protect something, or was he just paranoid? Before they could dig deeper into the mysteries of the journal, the three of them were startled by a noise. It was soft at first, just a gentle scratching sound, but seemed to emanate from the wall. The kids froze, eyes darting towards that direction. The sound grew louder, more distinct, as if something, or rather, someone, was stirring behind the walls. "You hear that, right?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely able to choke out the fear within. Sophie nodded, closing a squeeze on the journal that made her think of home. They froze, not moving or talking, as the noise ended as suddenly as it started. The quiet after was a dreadful affair. "We have to tell Mom and Dad," Sophie said finally, her voice shaking. They crawled through the passage again, their footsteps very loud in the dark hallway. They burst into the living room, where their parents were unpacking the last of the boxes. "Mom, Dad, you won't believe what we just found," an excited Ethan stammered out. They launched into a very quick explanation of the hidden door, the secret passage, the weird journal, and the funny noise they had heard. While Mr. Parker was skeptical, he was intrigued enough to say, "Let me take a look." He got up and grabbed a flashlight, heading back upstairs with the kids. When they went back inside the secret room, Mr. Parker began checking all the walls if he noticed anything. Just as he was to dismiss it and say it was old house noises, the noise came back louder, more insistent, like something was moving in the walls. With a loud clang, one of the panels in the wall slid open to reveal yet another compartment. Inside was a small sealed metal box. Mr. Parker retrieved it very carefully and placed it on the floor. The air was heavy in the room, with family members gathering around in anticipation. "What do you think is inside?" Mrs. Parker asked softly. "I don't know, but we're going to," said Mr. Parker, quickening the pace of prying the box open. Inside the box were old letters of handwritten prints, easily friable in the hands due to erosion, with a set of keys and a photograph. The picture was that of a young woman who was standing in front of the house. It was dated over 80 years back. Through these letters, it came to light that the lady in this picture was Henry's sister, with whom no one had ever discussed. These letters had the saddest stories of Henry's sister disappearing under mysterious circumstances, and how Henry was taking every step under the sun to get at the truth, feeling that the secret of it all lay somewhere in the walls of the house. The family listened on, and shivers ran through them. Was there more that this old house held in its breach than just old furniture and forgotten rooms? The thought lingered as eyes met in silent conversations. The Parkers were utterly shocked. From what they had just found out, this wasn't any ordinary hidden chamber, but, actually, the key to a decades-old mystery buried inside the very walls of their house for generations. They felt the history of their new home was something much deeper and far more mysterious than they could ever imagine. It was quite clear the Parker family had come upon a secret that had been buried for almost a century. What goes on behind the walls of each old house is a mystery in itself. If you liked this story and want to hear more, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you think might have happened to Henry's sister. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you guys next time. Curious what happens when a tiger cries for help and a brave man steps in? Check out this video to discover the wild story.